As you know, we have been doing a continuous reading of the book of Genesis all summer. And last Sunday we reached the end. Just on a funny note, my father, who was not the easiest man, nor was he the most religious man, but he told me once over lunch that he considered himself an expert on the book of Genesis for how many times he was determined to read the whole Bible. So congratulations, you have made it through the first book. We have gone from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Esau, all of them, Joseph being sold into slavery. We've gone through all of those, and now we're at the beginning of the book of Exodus. So Joseph, of the Technicolor Dreamcoat, has died a ripe old age, and now a time gap we're not quite sure of happens, and we are now introducing Moses into our new Netflix series of Genesis to Exodus. And in it, you're going to hear, it's a dramatic story of very parallel to Jesus's life, but I won't digress into that. But he's born, the new king, the new Pharaoh who doesn't even remember Joseph, so some time has passed. The new Pharaoh is worried that the Jewish people are going to take over Egypt. And so he puts out an edict that all the male babies are to be killed. So again, this is one of those readings that kind of needs a warning label at the beginning, that there are some disturbing images in this. But a pharaoh, a king like Herod, who's given an order to kill all the male children, and you're going to hear the heroes are the midwives, where they've got their order to kill the male children, but they don't. There's also a little boost for the Jewish people that the midwives say, well, Pharaoh, the Jewish mothers, they're tougher than the rest, and they don't call us. That's why we didn't kill them. But Moses is born, and his mother, to protect him, puts him in the basket. You probably know this story, and pushes the basket out into the river. Not exactly the best. You still want to call social services on this reading. But Pharaoh's daughter is taking a bath, and suddenly in the bath she gets a baby. And she sees this basket, takes it, and basically adopts. So the weird thing about it is how a Jew, in Joseph, became the ruler of Egypt, and then disappears and is forgotten. And now Moses down in Egypt is going to end up rising up to the level of Pharaoh, basically. God seems to have sneaky ways of getting things done. And Pharaoh's daughter takes on this child, and of course Moses' real mother and sister are standing on the banks. And you can imagine what they're feeling, but also the joy that the child isn't going out to sea, but someone has rescued him and taken him. And then the weird twist of the story, where truth is stranger than fiction. Pharaoh's daughter, with this new baby that she is obviously not going to kill, but has probably figured out what the scenario is, that her crazy dad had said to kill all these children. She takes this stray in, but realizes she needs a nanny, and she picks the woman on the bank, which is Moses' real mother. So Moses' real mother and his sister Miriam are going to end up being the nanny for the biological child that Pharaoh's daughter is raising. Again, this is just program notes. We're going to get a lot of Moses in the coming weeks, but I wanted to draw attention to some of the remarkable things in that reading. But then I skip over to the gospel. And in the gospel, we're going to again, be in a certain context. You'll remember last week, a Gentile, a Canaanite woman, a pagan, comes up to Jesus and says, "Cure my daughter." And he's almost rude to her of saying, no, I only came for the Jews, and I'm not dealing with you. But she presses him, which is, again, a very good model for our prayers, that we can change God's mind by kind of pestering him. He tells us this in many stories. And she does. She presses him. He's rude to her and says it's not fair to take the food from the children's table and feed it to the dogs. Calling her a female dog is not exactly my favorite picture of Jesus, but it came out well in the end. And it looks like she converted him. It's amazing, the idea of converting God, that it isn't just for Jews, it's for all humanity, that even the dogs deserve the crumbs that fall from the table. Now, that change of mind from somebody, whether it's Jesus or the Gentiles, he's in deep Gentile territory. We hear that he's in Caesarea Philippi, and the name is a clue that Caesar. So this is basically, if you think of as the Jews might, you think of the Roman occupation as kind of Nazis. This is Jesus standing at Nazis' headquarters in Caesar Philip's place. It was a place where supposedly there was a cliff with lots of statues of all the different gods. Caesars, of course, started to market themselves as sons of God, that they were demigods and should be obeyed, therefore. And you can just see Jesus and the apostles looking at all these busts and statues. And Jesus always, when he asks a question, and someday I hope to kind of do a paper on all the questions that Jesus asks. But he asks them, who do people say that I am? And they stumble. They're like, well, some people think you're Elijah come back. Some people think you're John the Baptist, your cousin come back. Some people think you're Jeremiah, etc. None of which is the right answer. And all of a sudden, Peter is going to say, you're the Messiah. You're the Son of God. But I'm going to pause the video for a second to say with clergy especially, there's a joke about this, that Jesus asks, who do people say that I am? And in the cartoon, it says, Peter answered, why, you're the eschatological manifestation of the ground of our being, the charisma of which we find the ultimate ontological meaning in our interpersonal relationships. And in the next square, Jesus says, what? I think it's a good question for him to ask us. Who is Jesus to you? Who do you say he is? And I've told you before, like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I have certain opinions of this. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I have more elevated opinions. But it is the essential question of who is Jesus? Was he just some good man, some remarkable teacher, but perfectly normal person? Did he have all human DNA? Or is he God incarnate? And most of the time, I'm of the school, this is God. God becoming one of us. At least the idea of that is so beautiful. So I probably have what St. Peter would have called a high Christology, that I see Jesus as God, and therefore, I think this is demonstrated by what is your view of communion. Is it just bread and wine, or is there divinity in this? He says it's my body and my blood, and we struggle. Is he being metaphorical? Is he being literal? Is this spiritual? And there's a certain point where I have to let go and let God and say, my rational mind doesn't compute all this, but you seem to say that this is important, and this is you, and that you are God, and this is the body of God that we're eating. I struggle with it, and you're allowed to struggle with this. But when Peter comes out with his answer, Jesus says, blessed are you, Peter, because you didn't get this answer in your own reasoning. This was given to you as a gift. That you can say, I'm the Messiah and I am God, is God working in you. And so I would say you can take all your doubts, all the questioning about whether that's really his body and blood or whether Jesus was really God, and you are allowed to get it wrong. St. Peter got it wrong almost all the time. The one time he gets it right, Jesus tells him, it wasn't really you, was it? That was God. But he gives him then the keys of the kingdom. And that's a whole nother sermon, but I want you to think about what is this? These metaphorical keys given to Peter. What was locked? Why would the gates of heaven be locked in the first place? And it's one thing for Jesus to say, I forgive you, because the rabbis, that's what really ticked them off the most, was only God can forgive. Not a priest, not you, a rabbi, only God can forgive. And so when Jesus says, I forgive you, and that is what stirs them up the most, but even more remarkable, this giving of the keys to open an understanding of the kingdom, to open our minds, things that are all around us, right in front of us. Sometimes we need that revelation to see the wonders that we're taking for granted. In that, though, is also what you hold bound on earth, I'll hold bound in heaven. And what you loose on earth, I'll loose in heaven. This giving of that authority to humans, to us, not just to Peter or the apostles, but also to us, that if we forgive somebody, Jesus will forgive them. But if we don't forgive them, it says Jesus won't. And the key of unlocking and opening this passage, I personally want to use the power of the keys as liberally as I can. If I'm going to get blamed at my judgment, I want it to be that I used the key of forgiveness more than Jesus would have allowed or would have wanted. But since I did, he's going to respect it. And what you hold loose, I will hold loose. I want to use that as wildly as possible. I don't want to get to my judgment and have him say, I gave you the keys, what did you do with it? I bound a lot of people up. Not what I want at my judgment. I want it to be, I used it too loosely, too liberally. And I believe that's in his teaching, that is the church, the rock, built on this rock, that the rock is quite often Peter's head. It's as thick as one. The irony of his name is hilarious, but let us think and meditate, who is Jesus to us? Does he have the authority to forgive? And if he has the authority to forgive, isn't it wild that he has delegated that to us? And how are we using it? We are, after all, to be another Christ. We are to be Jesus out in that world, in the Jewish and Gentile world. So let us listen as God tries to tell us what the grand plan is for all this creation. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.